I'm so glad you're here. If you're watching this video, please like and subscribe to my channel and tell me in the comments where you're listening to my story of revenge from. I want to know how far it's traveled. I held the keys to my first fully paid home, a dream I had waited 70 years for. Jonah, my son, and his wife Talia cut cake with me in the kitchen as balloons hung from the ceiling. The vanilla frosting tasted sweet, but my joy turned sour when I heard Talia on the phone in the hallway. "Yes, Mom, we'll make sure you get the master suite," she whispered into her cell phone. My fork froze halfway to my mouth. Master suite? I looked around my new kitchen, confused. The master bedroom was mine. I had picked it out myself when I toured this house 3 times before buying it. Jonah laughed at something on his phone, not paying attention to his wife's conversation. Talia walked back into the kitchen with a bright smile, as if nothing had happened. She hugged me tight and said, "Congratulations again, Mom Viviana. This is going to be perfect for everyone." Everyone? I forced a smile and nodded, but my stomach felt heavy. Something was wrong. Very wrong. I had saved every penny for decades to buy this house, working double shifts at the diner until my feet ached. This was supposed to be my sanctuary, my reward for a lifetime of hard work. That night, a WhatsApp group titled Move-In Plan appeared on my phone. I stared at the screen, my reading glasses sliding down my nose. The group included Soraya, who is Talia's mother, her 2 grown sons, and even Talia's sister. There was a color-coded chart showing bedrooms throughout my house. Everyone had a place assigned to them except me. My hands shook as I scrolled through the messages. Soraya had written, "The blue room will be perfect for me and my plants." Nico, Talia's brother, had claimed the room near the garage for his tools. Ramon, the other brother, wanted the room with the best morning light for his art supplies. They were talking about my house like it belonged to them, like I was just some guest who happened to live there. I read message after message, my heart pounding harder with each one. They had planned everything down to who would use which bathroom and when. I set my phone down on my nightstand and stared at the ceiling. The house felt different now, like strangers were already living in it even though I was alone. I had worked so hard for this moment, and now it felt like it was slipping away from me before I could even enjoy it. At breakfast the next morning, Jonah poured himself coffee and told me not to worry. "It's just family helping family, Mom. You know how important family is." His voice was cheerful, like he was talking about a vacation plan instead of people moving into my house. Talia smiled tightly and buttered her toast. "You'll never be lonely again, Mom Viviana. Isn't that wonderful?" She said it like loneliness was my biggest problem, not privacy or having my own space. When I asked about having some time to myself, Talia brushed it off with a wave of her hand. "You'll adjust. You're tough, Mom Viviana. Besides, we'll all help with cooking and cleaning." She made it sound like a favor, but I had been cooking and cleaning for myself just fine for 70 years. Jonah nodded along with everything his wife said. "Think of all the help you'll have around the house. No more worrying about heavy lifting or yard work." He squeezed my shoulder like he was doing me the biggest favor in the world. I sipped my orange juice and stayed quiet. They had already decided everything without asking me. My new house was becoming their house, and I was becoming the guest. The following weekend, a pickup truck pulled into my driveway. I watched from my kitchen window as Soraya stepped out with 2 large suitcases and a box of houseplants. She moved like she was coming home from a long vacation, not visiting someone else's house. I opened my front door and stood on the porch. "This isn't your house, Soraya," I said as kindly as I could manage. My voice sounded weaker than I wanted it to. She looked up at me with a sweet smile and replied, "Not yet, dear. But it will be." She dragged her suitcases up my front steps like she owned the place. The wheels left small scratches on the wooden porch I had just paid to have painted. Talia appeared from the truck's passenger seat, carrying more boxes. "Mom Viviana, we're just getting Mama settled in. She's so excited to live here with us." She said it like this was something we had all agreed to when I had never agreed to anything. I stepped aside and let them carry the boxes into my house. What else could I do? They were family, even if they weren't treating me like family. I watched Soraya examine my living room like she was planning to redecorate it, and my chest felt tight with worry. A pastor I had never seen before arrived at my door with a small bottle of oil. Soraya had called him to bless the new family compound. She explained with her hands clasped together like she was praying. I stood in my own living room and watched this stranger walk through my house, touching my walls and muttering prayers. He blessed the kitchen, the bedrooms, and even the bathrooms. Soraya bowed her head in my living room, thanking God for their house. My hands shook, but I bit my tongue and said nothing. This was my house, the one I had saved and sacrificed for. But somehow, in just a few days, it was becoming theirs. The pastor smiled at me and said I was blessed to have such a caring family. Jonah and Talia held hands during the blessing, looking like the perfect couple. They thanked the pastor and slipped him some money for his time. I wanted to scream that this was my house, my money, my life, but my throat felt closed up. After the pastor left, Soraya hugged me and said, "Now we're officially home." She smelled like lavender perfume and confidence. I nodded and smiled, but inside I felt like a stranger in my own house. The blessing felt more like a claim being made on something that belonged to me. I woke up the next morning and found my groceries rearranged in the refrigerator. My milk was pushed to the back, and Soraya's specialty spices took up most of the door shelves. The freezer was full of foods I didn't recognize, leaving no room for the simple meals I usually prepared. Talia found me staring into the fridge and announced, "Don't worry about cooking anymore, Mom Viviana. I'll be handling meals for everyone now." She said it like she was doing me a huge favor, but I enjoyed cooking my own simple dinners. When I protested that I liked making my own food, Jonah walked into the kitchen and sighed. "Relax, Mom. You should be grateful. Talia is an amazing cook, and you won't have to worry about grocery shopping or meal planning anymore." Grateful. The word stung because I wasn't grateful at all. I was confused and hurt. This was supposed to be my new beginning, my chance to live comfortably in my own space. Instead, I was being pushed out of my own kitchen. Talia opened my spice cabinet and frowned. "We'll need to get some real seasonings in here. Your food is so bland, Mom Viviana." She said it with a laugh, but it felt mean. I had been feeding myself just fine for 70 years. Nico and Ramon arrived with a truck full of power tools and stacks of lumber. They explained they were going to turn my garage into a workshop for their projects. I watched them unload table saws and drill presses like they were moving into their own space. "Where is my car supposed to go?" I asked, pointing to my old sedan that barely fit in the garage as it was. I needed my car to get to doctor appointments and the grocery store. Nico shrugged and wiped sweat from his forehead. "The street should be fine. These tools need to be kept dry and secure." He said it like my car was less important than his hobby equipment. Ramon nodded in agreement. "Don't worry, Mrs. Viviana. We'll make sure to keep the noise down during the day." He was being polite, but he wasn't asking permission. He was telling me how things were going to be. I watched them carry in more equipment, my heart sinking with each trip. My garage was disappearing, being turned into their space. I had planned to use the garage for storage and maybe a small garden workshop. Now it was becoming their domain, and my car was being pushed out onto the street like an unwanted guest. One afternoon, I walked into my master bedroom and found Soraya lying on my bed. She was testing the mattress, bouncing slightly and nodding with approval. My personal space was being invaded, and she acted like it was completely normal. She patted the mattress and looked at me with a serious expression. "This room was meant for someone my age, not you, dear. The stairs to the smaller bedroom upstairs would be much better for you. Less walking, more convenient."
Изцерта her, speechless.
This was my bedroom, in my house, that I had paid for with my own money. But she was talking about it like it belonged to her, like I was the one who needed to adjust and compromise. I retreated from my own bedroom without saying a word. My throat felt tight, and I didn't trust my voice to stay steady. In the hallway, I leaned against the wall and took deep breaths. How had this happened so quickly? That night, I slept in the guest room upstairs, telling myself it was just temporary. But as I lay in the smaller bed, staring at the unfamiliar ceiling, I knew things were changing fast. My house was being taken over, room by room, and I felt powerless to stop it. A chore chart appeared on my refrigerator overnight, stuck there with a bright yellow magnet. My name was listed under laundry and light cleaning, like I was an employee in my own house. Talia stood next to me as I read the chart, chirping happily. It's only fair that everyone contributes, right, Mom Viviana? We're all family here. She pointed to her own name under meal planning and grocery shopping, jobs she had given herself without asking. My knees ached just thinking about doing everyone's laundry. I had been looking forward to retirement, to taking things easy in my own home. Instead, I was being assigned chores like a teenager. Jonah's name wasn't on the chart at all. When I pointed this out, Talia laughed and said, Jonah works so hard at his job. He needs to rest when he's home. Apparently, my years of working double shifts didn't count for anything. Soraya walked into the kitchen and smiled at the chart. This is perfect, Talia. Organization is so important in a big family. She patted my arm and added, Don't worry, Viviana. Light cleaning won't be too hard for you. I nodded and smiled, but my resolve was hardening. I had not worked my entire life to become a maid in my own house. Soraya handed me a grocery list that was 3 pages long. At the bottom, she had written the total cost in red ink, $427.50. My pension check was $800 a month, and she wanted me to spend more than half of it on groceries for people who had invited themselves to live in my house. I didn't agree to pay for everyone's food, I said, trying to keep my voice calm. The list included expensive steaks, specialty wines, and foods I had never heard of. Jonah overheard and walked into the kitchen with a frown. You can cover it this time, right, Mom? We're all family here, and family helps each other out. He said it like I was being selfish for questioning the expense. Talia nodded enthusiastically. Think of all the money you're saving by having us help with the house. This is really just paying us back. She made it sound like they were doing me favors instead of taking over my life. I looked at the grocery list again, my hands trembling slightly. Half of the items were things I would never eat or couldn't even pronounce. But everyone was staring at me, waiting for me to agree. I folded the list and put it in my purse. I'll see what I can do, I said quietly. But inside, I was starting to plan something very different. I tried to check my email and found that the Wi-Fi name had been changed to Family House. When I asked Talia for the new password, she sighed like I was bothering her with a difficult request. We thought you didn't really need internet that much, Mom Viviana. You mostly just watch TV anyway. She was wrong. I like to stay in touch with old friends and read the news online, but she had decided what I needed without asking. I wrote the word mine on a sticky note and placed it on the router. It was a small act of rebellion, but it felt important. This was still my house, even if everyone was acting like it belonged to them. Jonah saw the sticky note and laughed. Mom, you're so cute when you get feisty. He peeled off my note and threw it in the trash. Talia set up the Wi-Fi to work better for everyone. You'll get used to it. That night, I sat in my living room with no internet access, watching people laugh and talk in the space I had dreamed of enjoying peacefully. They were connected to the world through my Wi-Fi, but I was disconnected in my own home. I realized then that this wasn't going to get better on its own. They weren't going to suddenly respect my space or my wishes. I needed to take action. At dinner, Soraya stood up and tapped her water glass with a spoon. I have an announcement, she said with a smile that made my stomach clench. Everyone looked at her expectantly. Since I have the most life experience here, I think it makes sense for me to be the head of household. I can help everyone stay organized and make sure things run smoothly. She sat back down like she had just announced the weather, not declared herself the boss of my house. Everyone nodded in agreement except me. I sipped my soup and stayed quiet, but my mind was racing. Head of household? In my house. The house I had saved for and bought with my own money? Talia clapped her hands together. That's perfect, Mama. You're so good at organizing and managing people. She looked at me and added, Isn't that great, Mom Viviana? You won't have to worry about making decisions anymore. I smiled and nodded, but inside I was furious. I had been making my own decisions for 70 years, and I wasn't ready to stop now. If Soraya wanted to be head of a household, she could find her own house to run. That night, I knew I needed a plan that was bigger than sticky notes and silent protests. I stepped into my backyard the next morning and found Ramon digging up my flower bed. My roses, the ones I had specifically asked the previous owner to leave, were piled up next to a growing hole. "We're turning this into a family garden," he explained proudly, wiping dirt from his hands on his jeans. "Vegetables are much more practical than flowers, don't you think?" I stared at my roses lying in the dirt, their roots exposed and drying in the sun. Those roses had been one of the reasons I fell in love with this house. Now they were being sacrificed for a garden I hadn't asked for. "What if I liked the roses?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. My chest felt tight watching the flowers I had planned to enjoy wilt in the morning sun. Ramon looked confused, like he hadn't considered that I might have an opinion about my own backyard.
Oh.
"Well, vegetables are more useful. You can't eat roses." He went back to digging, dismissing my feelings completely. I walked back into the house, my hands clenched into fists. My patience was wearing thin, stretched like a rubber band about to snap. They were changing everything about my home without asking, and treating my wishes like they didn't matter. Jonah sat me down at my own kitchen table with Talia and Soraya for what they called financial planning. They had prepared a folder full of papers and serious expressions. "We think it makes sense to pool our resources," Jonah began, opening the folder. "Your pension and savings can go toward the mortgage, and we'll all contribute to utilities and food." I stared at him, confused. "What mortgage?" I asked. The house was paid in full. That was the whole point of saving for so many years. Talia looked surprised. "Well, the ongoing costs of maintaining a house this size. Property taxes, insurance, repairs. It all adds up, Mom Viviana." They had prepared a budget that assumed I would pay for most of the house expenses while they lived here for free. My name was at the top of every payment category, while their names appeared under household contributions for things like emotional support and companionship. I excused myself and went upstairs to my small bedroom. From my desk drawer, I pulled out the deed that clearly stated the house was paid in full. They had no idea what they were talking about, but they were confident in their ignorance. I sat on the bed holding my deed, the paper that proved this house was mine alone. Instead of arguing with them, I started taking quiet steps. I called a real estate agent I found online and arranged to meet her at a coffee shop across town. Her name was Melissa, and she had kind eyes and a professional manner. "This house should sell quickly," Melissa assured me, looking at the photos I had brought. "The market is very good right now for homes in your neighborhood. We could have buyers within a week if you're serious about selling." I smiled for the first time in days. "I'm very serious," I told her. The coffee shop was warm and quiet, a peaceful contrast to the chaos my house had become. Melissa explained the process and the paperwork I would need. She was efficient and respectful, treating me like an adult who could make her own decisions. It felt wonderful after days of being treated like a confused old woman. We scheduled a time for her to come see the house when everyone else would be out. I felt lighter walking back to my car, like I was finally taking control of my situation. That night, I slept better than I had since Jonah and Talia's wedding cake celebration. I had a plan, and it felt good to be moving forward instead of just enduring. That night, I overheard Jonah whispering to Talia in their bedroom. My room was right next door, and the walls were thinner than I had realized. Their conversation made my heart ache and my resolve stronger. "Do you think we can add our names to the deed?" Jonah asked quietly. "I mean, she's getting older, and it would be good to have everything legal and clear." Talia's voice was excited. "I think so. My mom talked to a lawyer friend, and he said there are ways to do it for family protection. We just need to convince her it's for her own good." I lay in bed with my eyes closed, listening to my son, and his wife planned to take my house away from me legally. They weren't even trying to hide their intentions anymore. My heart felt heavy, but my mind was clear. I had raised Jonah to be honest and kind, but somewhere along the way he had learned to be greedy and manipulative. It hurt, but it also made my decision easier. I kept my face calm and my breathing steady, pretending to be asleep. But inside, I was preparing to do exactly the opposite of what they were planning. More relatives started showing up with sleeping bags and suitcases. Talia's sister arrived with her 2 teenagers, and Soraya's brother came with his girlfriend. My living room looked like a campground, with people sleeping on air mattresses and couches. It'll just be temporary, Talia promised me as she helped her sister set up a sleeping area near my fireplace. Just until everyone gets settled and finds their own place. The house echoed with laughter and conversations that didn't include me. I moved through my own home like a ghost, stepping around people and their belongings. My quiet sanctuary had become a crowded boarding house. I slept with earplugs and kept my purse under my pillow. The house felt dangerous now, not because anyone was threatening me, but because I was losing myself in the chaos and noise. During the day, I started visiting the library for peace and quiet. It was the only place I could think clearly and make phone calls without everyone listening. I used the library computers to research real estate laws and my rights as a homeowner. The librarian, Mrs. Chun, was kind and helped me print out information. I felt like I was planning a secret mission, which I suppose I was. When I went to leave for a doctor's appointment, I found my car blocked in by 3 other vehicles. My small sedan was trapped behind Ramon's truck, Nico's van, and Soraya's car like a puzzle piece that didn't fit. Ramon came outside and handed me his keys with a smile. "You won't need your car today, Mrs. Viviana. We'll drive you wherever you need to go." He said it like he was being helpful, but it felt like another freedom being taken away. I wanted to argue, but I was already late for my appointment. I climbed into his truck, feeling like a passenger in my own life. The seat was too high and the radio was too loud, and I felt helpless. At the doctor's office, I called Melissa from the waiting room. "How soon can we close on the sale?" I asked quietly. She said we could move very quickly with the right buyer, maybe within a week. That afternoon, I started checking listings for small houses in my hometown 3 hours away. I found a cozy cottage with a garden and a garage. It was perfect for one person who wanted peace and quiet. The insult of being driven in my own car burned, but it also motivated me. I was ready to act. Soraya announced at breakfast that her apartment had flooded and she had nowhere else to go. She looked sad and helpless, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. "Of course you can stay here as long as you need," Jonas said immediately, patting her shoulder. Family takes care of family. But something felt wrong about her story. I had worked in restaurants long enough to know when someone was lying. Her clothes were dry, her hair was perfect, and she seemed more excited than upset about her emergency. That afternoon, I called her landlord. I found his number in the phone book and pretended to be interested in renting an apartment in her building. He told me there were no flooding issues and that all units were in perfect condition. The lie sealed my decision completely. Soraya wasn't a victim of bad luck. She was a manipulator who had planned this invasion of my home. I wasn't going to let myself be fooled anymore. I called Melissa and told her I wanted to sell as quickly as possible. She said she had a young couple who were very interested and could close within days. I told her to move forward immediately. I signed the paperwork with Melissa in the same quiet coffee shop where we had first met. The buyer was a young couple with twin babies who were thrilled to find a house so quickly. They were kind and excited, reminding me of how I had felt when I first bought the place. "We promised to take good care of it," the wife said, holding one of her babies. "We love the roses in the backyard." I didn't tell her that Ramon had dug up most of them. The ink dried on the contract, and I walked out of the coffee shop feeling lighter than I had in weeks. The house was no longer mine, but it also wouldn't be theirs much longer either. I had sold my dream house, but I had also saved my sanity and my independence. Sometimes the best way to win is to change the game completely. Melissa handed me a check and promised the new owners could take possession in 3 days. I folded the check carefully and put it in my purse next to my bus ticket to my hometown. For the first time since the celebration cake, I felt like myself again. I was taking control of my own life. At dawn 3 days later, I packed my belongings into 2 small suitcases. I didn't take much, just my clothes, photos of my late husband, and the jewelry he had given me over the years. Everything else could stay with the house. I moved quietly through the rooms, saying goodbye to the dream I had saved so long for. It hurt to leave, but it hurt more to stay and watch my dream become their nightmare. No one noticed as I loaded my suitcases into the back of a taxi. The house was full of sleeping people who had never asked if they could live there, and now they would all have to find somewhere else to go. I took one last look at the house from the taxi window. It was beautiful, and I had loved it for the short time it was truly mine. But a house is just walls and rooms if the people inside don't respect each other. The taxi driver was quiet and polite, just like I needed him to be. As we drove away, I felt sad but also free. I was finally putting myself first. I left without saying goodbye to anyone. As Jonah and Talia argued about breakfast plans in the kitchen, I was already on a bus heading to my hometown 3 hours away. The countryside rolled past my window like a peaceful movie. The house was no longer mine, but it would never be theirs either. They had no idea what was coming, and part of me felt guilty about the surprise they were about to get. But only a small part. The bus was comfortable and quiet, filled with people reading books and looking out windows. I felt anonymous and free, like I was starting a new chapter of my life instead of ending an old one. I called the cottage owner from the bus station and confirmed I could move in immediately. She was a sweet woman who lived next door and was happy to have a quiet tenant. The cottage was furnished and ready for someone who just wanted peace. As the bus pulled into my hometown, I saw familiar streets and buildings. I had grown up here, and now I was coming back to finish growing old here. It felt right. 2 days later, the new owners knocked on the door of my old house with legal documents and moving trucks. Soraya answered the door, expecting visitors or maybe a delivery. Instead, she was handed a notice that said the house had been sold and everyone needed to vacate immediately or face court eviction. The shock spread through the house like a fire, with people shouting and crying and demanding explanations. I heard about it from Melissa, who called to tell me the transfer had gone smoothly. The new owners were understanding about the situation, but they needed their house back immediately. Everyone was very surprised, Melissa said with understatement in her voice. They seemed to think they lived there permanently. I felt a pang of sadness for the confusion and upset I had caused, but I also felt vindicated. They had taken my house without asking, and now they were learning what it felt like to lose a home suddenly. The young couple with the twins were patient but firm. This was their house now, and they needed everyone out so they could move in with their babies. Jonah called me frantically that afternoon, his voice shaking with anger and hurt. "You betrayed us, Mom. How could you sell the house without telling us? We had plans. We were building a life there." I sat in my peaceful cottage kitchen and listened to him shout. When he finally ran out of breath, I spoke calmly. "It was my house, Jonah. My money, my decision, my right to sell it to whoever I wanted." "But we're family," he said, like that gave him ownership rights he had never earned. "Family respects each other," I replied quietly. "Family asks before taking. Family doesn't lie about flooded apartments or make charts assigning chores to the homeowner." There was silence on the phone. Then Jonah said something about lawyers and unfairness and how I was wrong to treat them this way. I told him I loved him, but I wouldn't let anyone take advantage of me anymore, even family. Then I hung up the phone and turned it off. I had said everything that needed saying. In my hometown, I settled into my cottage with its small garden and quiet porch. I planted new roses, sipped tea in the morning sunshine, and enjoyed the peaceful silence of a home that was truly mine. My cottage was smaller than the house I had sold, but it was perfectly sized for one person who wanted to read books and 10 flowers. I had everything I needed and nothing I didn't want. Sometimes I felt sad about the way things had ended with Jonah and his family. I had hoped they would respect my generosity instead of taking advantage of it. But I had learned that some people will take everything you give them and then ask for more. My revenge wasn't cruel, it was freedom. They had expected me to give up my home and my independence to make their lives easier. Instead, I had sold it out from under them and chosen a life where I finally came first. In the evenings, I sat on my porch and watched my neighbors water their gardens. They waved and smiled, treating me like a person instead of a resource to be used up. I had learned that it's never too late to start over and choose happiness over obligation.